Welcome back, everybody, to episode number 4 of the Untangling Election 2021 podcast, your weekly podcast keeping track of the 2021 Canadian federal election. Today, we have a special episode. We're doing our second platform deep dive, this time on the Conservative Party of Canada. The Progressive Conservative Party, or the PC Party, is Canada's centre-right-leaning political party, championing a host of fiscally responsible ideals and values. They've held government in Canada a number of times and have almost always been the official opposition when not in power. This campaign, they're back with their new and quote-unquote youthful leader, Erin O'Toole. Well, prior to the campaign, the polls were not looking great for them. In the past few days and weeks, their support has really pitched up, and they've been looking like a really viable contender and looking like they're going to make some real gains this election. And no doubt, this has been helped by the release of their platform 2 days after the campaign started. So in this episode, we'll be looking at what they're up to, what their platform says, and why somebody might want to vote Conservative this time around. Today, I'm joined by one of my old friends, Yussef. Tell the people a bit about yourself, Yussef.
Hi, I'm Yussef. I am an actuary, just moved, on my way to moving to Chicago. I have known Simon for quite a while. We went to university together, the University of Waterloo. Yeah, that's about it.
Well, you're really selling yourself short there, because I will remind the audience, we're with the founder of the University of Waterloo Model Parliament organization. Want to enlighten us about that successful venture of ours, Yussef?
Yes, Model Parliament. It was founded in our second year
It
and
was our
lasted.
first year, was it not?
It was our first year. No, you're right. It was the first year, and it lasted 1 year. We had one major event, which was the mock parliament, and then after that, it didn't exist.
It was a fun thing to do. I built a bit of
Yeah,
time. We had like 4 or 5 MPs like show up and like talk and stuff. It
I
was
think
insane.
we had like I think 6 MPs. I think one minister, and then Justin Trudeau sent in a video for
Yes,
the opening ceremonies.
I had that on my resume so long. Like, host of Parliament's thing with like a video of Trudeau.
That
That
was
was great.
great.
We've been representing the voice of politics in Waterloo for quite some time, because I think that's like 6 years ago now. It must be, right?
Yeah, that's crazy. It actually has been 6 years. It was a fun weekend though. It was a 2 day debate essentially, and then an opening and closing ceremonies.
And don't forget like the external events in between.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways, I mean, it's been a while, but have you changed in that while? What are your biases politically? So tell the people a bit about how you think, how you lean politically when we're presenting this conservative, this glance at the conservative platform.
So yeah, I've definitely voted conservative in all the elections I have been able to vote, and have supported the party since I've made, a political decision. So I definitely lean towards them. So, anything I say definitely has a positive bias towards the party. I don't agree with like all their positions, like anyone doesn't, but generally I support the party. So
Yeah, and I mean, you are an actuary, so it kind of falls into place, right?
it does, yeah.
But I've always known you as I would say one of the more moderate conservatives. You've always been very rational and very open to discuss whatever's going on in the party, which is why I'm happy to have you on the podcast today to really discuss this really forward-thinking platform, if I can say so myself, that they recently released. Before we get into the platform, I wanted to ask you a little, Yusuf, about what have you thought about the 2021 election so far? So I've been asking everybody who comes on what they think of this election. I've gotten mixed responses. Some people are a bit more hesitant, others are really enthusiastic. Where do you fall, Yusuf? Because I mean, technically, you're in Canada right now, but you're going to be in America soon, right? So
Yeah, so I'm definitely like very enthusiastic about this whole thing. I wasn't as enthusiastic specifically about our leader in the last election, but I really like Erin O'Toole at the moment. And so that contributes a lot to my enthusiasm. And, the conservative leadership election, he was one of my top picks. So that definitely contributes. And me, as Simon said, I am a bit of a red Tory, quote unquote. Not really sure. So this platform itself really works well with my own opinions, and so it's exciting to see a party that kind of is more in line with what you like, also actually gaining a lot of ground, especially in the last week, which was kind of surprising, but
Yeah, because I will admit I may have been unnecessarily cruel to you throughout the past month, linking you every poll that I found with O'Toole
uh,
being like the lowest of popularity for leaders or underperforming. So it's been surprising to me, but he's really gained some traction. So maybe it's due to the
gosh,
platform.
yeah.
Who knows?
It seems like an exciting election. Like all the movement, like there's been so much movement in the polls lately, and definitely exciting. The whole controversy that happened with the Greens really shook things up. The like positions the bloc is taking, and just everything. It seems very interesting. So
Yeah, I want to, I think, run one quick unprepared question by you. But I was talking with Kevin about this on our first episode when we were talking about the election being called, right? And we were talking, did Trudeau maybe shoot himself in the foot with calling this election? Because we were thinking maybe people won't vote for him because they associate him with COVID, maybe won't vote because some other reason. But ultimately, we were like, no, he's performed very well over the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's going to carry him through. Do you share that sentiment, or do you think that maybe his foot is looking a bit shotten, to say it like that?
yeah, no, I agree. I think he shot himself in the foot a bit. I think he didn't really have a choice though, which is the other thing, because naturally the NDPs wouldn't go negative on the confidence vote. So yeah, I was surprised. Like Aaron O'Toole kind of used that in the first week pretty well. It seems like everyone used it well.
Yeah, it is interesting because he's really been, maybe just because he's a bit slower to get started, but maybe all our minds will be changed come the day before the election, and we'll see how strong debate performances are. But yeah.
It's kind of surprising too, because I feel like up in, the last 3, 4 months, like every political has been saying that there's going to be an election, there's going to be an election, and like every
Mhm.
single party has wanted an election except for maybe the NDPs, since, you know, it seems like they don't have enough money to run an election. But like the conservatives have been angling for it, liberals, the bloc. I don't know if the Green have, but
Judging their internal status, I think they were not very happy with this announcement. But that's actually to kind of plug our next episode. Episode releasing on Wednesday, I believe, will be looking at the Green Party pandemic within their own ranks, if I can call it that. Don't laugh too hard, Yussef. I am wearing a green T-shirt, which you can't see, but not a Green Party, but just green in color. So
I have green on too, so
that is completely blue.
no, it's green. It's a light green.
Hmm. I guess one of my side observations, which I'm totally going to keep in the podcast now that I'm making it, is have you noticed that like all the conservatives, they wear blue? Like it's not even like even if their color wasn't blue, they'd still show up to the rallies dressed in blue because they just like the color. It's just
I
inherently
like
done.
blue. If you look in my closet, like at least half to 3/4 of everything I have is blue.
But I mean, you're inherently proving my point here, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
anyways, we're getting off track. Let's look at the
Uh,
platform. Let's start by looking at the cover because that was what
yeah.
we jokingly discussed on our second episode or something. What do you think of the picture of O'Toole? How attracted are you to him on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think he's a very attractive man. I think he has the dad physique going well for him.
Yeah, because they're really trying to present him as more of a youthful image. Because I don't think there's ever been a conservative picture before with somebody wearing a black tee looking like they just stepped out of the gym. I
Yeah.
would never have seen Cher in that. I would never seen, God forbid, Harper in that. But I guess he's pulling it off, and he does make a convincing case. He does seem a bit more energetic than in the past, at least from that cover, right?
It seems like they're trying to correct every single mistake Sheer made.
Mm.
Like, with him essentially trying to do like the young equivalents.
Yeah, I mean, they still technically say, "Oh, O'Toole is a year younger than Trudeau, so he is younger."
Really?
It's true, yeah. O'Toole is, I think, 48 and Trudeau is 49.
Huh. I didn't know that.
uh, but what I also found nice on the cover is that they really handily had a bunch of their key campaign slogans in different fonts. So that kind of shows you, and I'm very much on this topic of what comes first and what is biggest is most important. So if we go through what the cover says, They make a few key statements. First, the big title is not platform. It actually doesn't say that at all. It says Canada's recovery plan. And I think that's a very pressing, it's very telling on how they want to present O'Toole as a person, as a leader, and as an individual, just somebody who's going to come in and help fix whatever pandemic crisis Canada's been found into. Then going into the nitty gritty, or like the little sidebars, the other headings, their key promises, the biggest one, I think, is creating 1 million jobs. And then the second biggest one is anti-corruption. And then they also had another big one of mental health action. And then the smallest one, which I found very surprising, was balancing the budget. So it's very much looked like an afterthought. And any impressions on that?
No, that's the 5 points are really interesting because he had very similar points in his run for leader. He like structured his campaign roughly around that, heavy on the mental health as well and the anti-corruption. And it obviously worked for him in the leadership race. And so I do appreciate that he's like consistent between his leadership campaign and this, which is great. It's definitely sort of appreciated to see the anti-corruption bullet along with, the consistency with that. I definitely realize what he's targeting with that. Given, yeah. So it's I think it's a smart plan for the actual campaign because it gives him 5 points to kind of rally around whenever it comes to sound bites and stuff like that. Like I know in the news when you kind of look, I've seen one of the big news covers was, Aaron O'Toole's plan for mental health, and then his, some of his job plans, and like these points seem to like come up in the headlines, and I think that's what he's targeting, and it seems to be working.
Yeah, and one other thing before we actually get into the platform, because we haven't even gone into it whatsoever, but balancing the budget as basically an afterthought, as a proud conservative supporter who has lobbied and be criticized the Liberals for not balancing the budget. What do you think of it being present but very small?
So we we looked a little bit into the plan already, but it's definitely not geared towards balancing the budget. Me myself, I definitely get not balancing the budget in the next like few years because for my very limited economics classes, I guess you're supposed to spend during a recessionary period. So it makes sense, but it definitely seems like an afterthought. And I know he mentions it, but I don't know if he like how he plans on achieving it. And it definitely seems like that. But I feel like you need to put it there in order to, not make a quarter of the conservative base rebel.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I think if the cover didn't have the phrase balancing the budget on there, I think that would cause some deep fissures to explode within the party. Because I think already, like, having mental health action plan, not saying anything about the Conservative Party being much bigger than balancing the budget, is really a huge statement on what kind of leader that O'Toole wants to be and will be. And I think it's really indicative. And I think it might not have gone over so well. I mean, 10 years ago, I would not, if you showed me this, I might have said that's a Liberal cover.
Yeah.
But let's get into the first big category. And he starts with jobs and economic growth. And before we want to say anything, I want to say that I was showing you this before we get into it, but the first picture, which is decisively of somebody else in the platform, is of a woman wearing a hijab on the page, which introduces jobs and economic growth. And I thought that was a very nice change of messaging from, I guess, from the Harper era conservative government, where the hijab became a major point of controversy in 2015, and it being featured so visibly so early on in his document. I think it's a subliminal message to us voters that there's change in his party. But is there also change under the jobs and economic growth? What's the main policy promises here, Yussef?
Yeah, so from what I can tell when I've read through his platform, it's mainly centered around tax credits and also the 50% salary, I guess, reimbursement for new employees. Given their previous job status, it's like up to 50%, along with a 25% tax credit up to like 100 or on like 100K for Canadians who personally invest in small businesses. And it seems like a lot of targeted tax credits to try and stimulate job growth. specifically in like small businesses and then in the general economy. It's a very conservative way of addressing the problem, I think. Um, and that is something I do like, is that he's taking this more from a like where can you, I guess, ideally put the money and see the growth that you want. On the other hand, it seems very expensive.
Mhm.
And I'm not really sure how it can be funded, but given the current, debt growth, I don't imagine that that's entirely a concern.
Yeah,
So
because
yeah,
personally, my thoughts when I was reading through it, I did think it was very expensive of like dealing with it. Like, I mean, paying half of somebody's salary for up to 6 months, that's a really huge promise there. Um,
yeah,
and I think yes, that will definitely create jobs. And I mean, I do think that this platform goes a much further than the NDP platform we talked about the other day into actually actualizing that 1 million jobs mark. I can see this accomplishing it much quicker than whatever the NDP's promised. But I do think it might it does seem very expensive. The bottom line of it, I think maybe what he's banking on, O'Toole, is that these new jobs will pump more money to the economy, and that will kind of be replenishing itself. But it's not as explicitly mentioned within the platform as we see it.
yeah. I think the other thing is that I noticed that a lot of these are short term items. The tax credits are, for example, the investment tax credit is for 2022, 2023. It all seems to be probably within like the next year to 3 years, which might, lend credence to his plan to balance the budget later on, since that's, balancing the budget instead of dealing with the debt that was already created during this period. I do actually, I like the direction that he's taking with a lot of these, just because they seem to be very targeted and I feel like they would be effective in achieving this goal. I like that a lot of them are short term because the problem itself is a little bit more short term. And a lot of them seem to have like stipulations or, ranges. For example, with that salary payment by the government, it goes from 25% to 50%, depending on how long the person was unemployed for. I'm not sure all the other, considerations, but very very targeted and very, it seems like policy oriented, like well thought out, and it's something, as a conservative actually I like to see. So
Yeah, and I definitely agree with what you're saying earlier about you could see it happening because, like, for instance, they were also mentioning there's a 50% rebate on food that you buy in restaurants on Mondays to Wednesdays. I'm totally going to go out and buy food if it's like 50% off Mondays to
yeah,
Wednesdays.
yeah,
Like that makes sense in my simple everyday consumer mind. It's like food cheaper, I will go buy food then. And I don't think many of the other platforms or policies so simply address these issues. I mean, hell,
yeah.
this is another thing that's later on, but I'm just going to throw it in here because it's somewhat similar. But their GST holiday that they were promising, I will totally buy a new laptop then if that does actualize, because that's going to save me $200 in taxes. I
Oh yeah,
think
same here.
yeah, it's very easy to understand as a consumer, and I think it will get him some points in the polls. Especially, I could see it being really simple talking points in debates. So I'm enthusiastic to see how he performs in debates.
Yeah, GST holiday, that sounds like a great talking point.
Yeah, I've never heard of something like that happening, but I'm not against experimenting as long as it doesn't screw up my future tax payments. So
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, and I can see why he decided on these things and why these specific policies are like the second or the fifth page.
Mhm. Also, I know you're an actuary, and actuaries aren't related to tax. I think those are accountants, right? But
Yes. Yeah.
same story in my simple mind. But
No.
he proposes to overhaul the tax system as well within this document, and that's basically all the clarification he gives. But
Yeah.
within that paragraph, there's also this funny promise where he's going to appoint a minister of red tape reduction,
Oh, I saw that.
which I thought was pretty ironic, as in that is creating more red tape by appointing a new minister. But
I I I find that very very interesting. I feel like it could be useful if it's like done correctly, more in terms of, if it relates to, for example, simplifying the tax code and simplifying other aspects of regulation that are a little complicated, because I'm sure you've experienced complicated bureaucracies, and
mhm.
um, it definitely takes a lot of time, and I can imagine on the back end it's expensive. So, I mean, with another ministry, they need staffers, and that's an expense in itself. So I'm not really sure if like it will ultimately save money, but if it makes our lives easier and it makes, the lives of businesses easier, then I would say that that might be a good thing, even though it's a very like catchphrase kind of name.
Yeah, and I found it hilarious too that like with explicitly stated, it's like they will accomplish like one red tape reduction each year, and like that's kind of a self fulfilling prophecy at this point. But I don't know. I'll move on. I'll move on from the funny parts in this platform. So part of also, I guess, jobs and economic growth, it's also lowering prices, and that was their next section. So we mentioned GST holiday a second ago, which we would love as consumers, but maybe not as future taxpayers who have been stuck with this deficit that Canada has. But they also mentioned a few other promises, like lowering cell phone plans, lowering internet costs, lowering food prices, which is an interesting promise, but one that I really noticed because I was in the Netherlands for a while. I came back here a year and a half later, and food was, I think, $2 or $1 more expensive across the board. It's insane. But anyways, Yusuf,
Really?
you haven't, I mean, you do have a job and earn more than me at the moment, so I wouldn't expect you to notice, but it's gotten a lot more
No,
expensive.
I noted like in France, I think it's a little more expensive than it was in the Netherlands. But like I know in the US, it's definitely cheaper than here, with exchange and everything. But yeah, no, the platform when it comes to that stuff, it was interesting. I noticed the child care part as well. And I was actually a really big fan of that. His 75% goal, which was like 75% of the cost of childcare for low income individuals, I thought was a very like well, I guess, planned amount. Maybe that can be graded to a higher percentage later. Who knows?
Do you have any issues with the fact that it's a rebate, though? Because that still means I have to pay the upfront costs and then get the money back later, right?
Yeah, I think it's a credit. Um, I might be wrong. It might be just, but
I might be wrong as well because I do not have children yet, so this I did not read that closely that section. So
no, I think they would end up paying like upfront and then gain the credit back later. But I feel like this is probably I guess the easiest way to implement it,
it
and
also seems
probably the most straightforward.
it also seems kind of the more fiscally responsive, I guess, just telling people like we'll give you the money back, just be sure you have to pay for it first. Like, teach
Yeah,
people how to spend properly, like you tell any good child, right?
yeah, and it's like achievable, and I know that a lot of the other parties have promised this. Obviously, I'm talking with the Liberal Party has promised this every year for the last what 3 decades, and they haven't delivered until they might deliver at the end of this election since they're making deals. But I don't even know once those deals are implemented if they'll still deliver since it's been forever. I mean, this
But
actually seems like a way to do it. So,
yeah, fair enough. I think their $10 a day daycare. I think some of it is in place already, but it's been heavily criticized for not being expansive enough and not being available to everybody. So, like you
yeah.
were saying, this is available to every family who will pay the upfront cost and then just get the rebate later or the credit later. So it does seem equitable. Talking about equitable stuff and things we want, housing. Credit to where credit is due. I think the NDP really pushed affordability to become the primary focus of this platform because the NDP platform, as we discussed the other day, it started with housing costs. In the Conservatives, which also have been very heavy on the affordability narrative, housing costs isn't until like page 20 or so. But they'd still promised to build 1 million homes over the next 3 years, which is more than NDP plan calls for. And they also, I think, had a little subclause of banning foreign investors from buying property while they're not living in Canada for the next 2 years. So what do you think of that as a potential future homeowner yourself, Yusuf?
I mean, I definitely like the building of the homes because I know specifically they mentioned that they're going to try and get them towards transit, which would be nice because it moves us away from the more automobile centric, like high carbon emissions method of travel we currently have. And I guess that works well with his whole carbon plan as well, which is like later on.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this was like entirely, coordinated. I imagine with all his like subliminal stuff throughout the plan, it was, but it's good to see kind of like that carbon consideration being brought in. But the foreign buyers thing, I mean, I'm not sure how valid this is, but I heard this on some other podcast.
Oh, it's a
Um,
disgrace.
Apparently, it's not like the increase in housing prices isn't that like highly due to foreign buyers. It's more of a domestic speculation issue. And so this particular like item won't actually do much. And I think it's the NDP also have the same line, or is it the Liberals? One of them
The
does.
Trudeau this week promised basically the same thing, and the NDP, they are limiting the amount of money they can invest or something, or they have some
Hmm.
limits set in place. It's different than this. It's not as strict actually, which is surprising. But
Yeah. So I mean, it doesn't seem like it will actually do much, but it's I guess worth a try, or at least he's thinking about it.
people want to hear it, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that covers most of his major promises in this topic area. I think we'll move
yeah.
on, I guess, to I think his next big promise is his mental health care plan, which I was pleasantly surprised at because typically when you hear about conservatives and healthcare, they are more in the process of privatizing and removing funding for it. Whereas O'Toole promises to add mental health care funding for everybody and greatly expand that experience. So, I mean, that seems like a great deal for Canadians.
It does. Again, a little, surprised, but I'm very happy that, he identified that as such a problem. And I feel like the problem itself has come more to light during COVID.
Hmm.
Like more people know about it. And so it's great that this is kind of like he recognized something that's in the public sphere and that people have started to like really want, and he's addressing that from a more political stance. It's a great soundbite and it's a great thing to campaign on. And, it feels more liberal than the liberals.
Yeah, I mean, the NDP make a similar promise, but the way, I mean, I think they promised like free healthcare for everybody, or mental health care for everybody. But the way O'Toole phrased it seems just so much more like a plan. Like he has a dedicated little Canadian mental health action plan. Like I was saying again, it's not a policy; it's a plan to get us recovered. So it's very on brand. It's very thematically consistent. It has a bunch of little points in how he's going to accomplish it. So it seems like a cool deal, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like this whole his whole plan kind of goes back, like you said, to his military background a bit too. He seems like a very structured individual and likes to have a actual plan in place when promising stuff. And I also like his like stance on, like the opioid crisis as well, treating it more like trying to, I guess, rehabilitate people and like help people instead of criminalize and punish people. And it seems like a better way of approaching it.
He even allows or supports safe injection sites, which 10 years ago, I would never have imagined a Conservative Party candidate even doing whatsoever. It's a complete 180, which I guess maybe it's for the better, maybe it's for the worse, depending on what type of conservative you are.
I was like, for a more cynical stance, I think there's a lot of safe injection sites in Canada. So at this point, like, disagreeing with it would be difficult.
Hmm.
Um, but it's good that he's kind of supporting something that will hopefully help solve the problem as well. It seems like he's thought through the whole mental health portion and generally people's health and trying to find a solution to it.
And I mean, let's move on to the next section, which kind of deals with people not thinking through things. And this is the securing accountability component, which seems like a key cornerstone of his plan. He introduces an anti corruption act, which would add new monetary penalties to cover violations. He's increasing penalties for the Conflict of Interest Act from $500 maximum to $50,000 maximum. You know, some way to pay back all these costs, right? If we're I'm not going to make a liberal joke here, but
Oh, you can.
uh, you're rubbing off on me, Yussef. And then he's also going to prevent MPs from collecting speaking fees, which I think universally most people would kind of get behind.
Yeah.
Any reactions? I'm pretty sure you're a pretty vocal conservative supporter, so I think I
It's
could
it's
let you
a
go on it.
very anti-liberal. It's a very good reaction to liberal ethics violations, I would say. And you know what? I think that a lot of these things are needed. I know Canada ranks very highly on democracy index, but the only way we can stay there or go up is to keep strengthening our anti-corruption laws and keep increasing punishments associated with them, make sure that, our politicians are not influenced by lobbyists too much. And I think no matter what, these are like good policies. And like ultimately, if like, the democracy itself is at all at risk, that's kind of a fundamental thing that it seems O'Toole is worried about and is attempting to address.
Yeah, I mean, the way he phrases like that, it seems less like a campaign point, but actually like a valid concern we should be worried about. So,
I mean, that's how I look at it.
Fair enough. I'm just throwing some jokes in there.
Yeah.
I think we're not going to focus on too much more because it is 160 pages worth of content. If you go by the official page count.
Yeah.
But should we talk a little bit about the climate change and environment? Because I know when I was talking with Ryan the other day, he said that the policies, as a young Canadian, many Canadians are concerned about climate change in Canada, and the Conservative Party has not always been as progressive on this area as many hope they should be. So do you think this platform goes somewhere with this?
The one thing I'm happy about, definitely, is that they don't intend on reversing the carbon tax, and it looks like they intend on like slightly increasing it in the future.
I think they're allowing it to increase a little, but they're limiting it at like $50 a ton, which I'm not sure how to compare to the Liberal guidelines, but I would expect them to be hoping to go further. But anyways, yeah. I was really surprised it wasn't axed altogether from my base understanding.
I mean, it definitely reflects Aaron O'Toole's whole outlook on the Conservatives themselves and his actual policies. Like, it reflects everything else that he's kind of proposed, a much more liberal policy agenda. And like when it comes to his climate agenda itself, I did like a few things, which were, trying to lower industry emissions and improving carbon capture technology. And then I kind of found the whole carbon border tariffs thing interesting. I know that was a crack at China as well, but it seems like I guess, smart policy.
Yeah, I think that not to go off too much of a side note, but there were a lot of little cracks at China throughout this thing. But I don't know.
Yeah,
I've seen people call it pretty anti-China, which I mean, it follows their messaging. So,
I mean, it's fair. I know that Aaron O'Toole is more outspoken against China than Trudeau has been, but the whole Canadian Parliament, all the non-liberals, are they voted, I think, to denounce the Uyghurs. So it's probably not like that out of the blue that he's taking, the stance. And I know the EU wants to implement that like carbon tariff kind of thing for if someone doesn't have a carbon tax and it comes within the border, they're going to equate it to the same level there. So those kind of ideas seem smart here as well. So I do appreciate a more climate change oriented plan than what was presented under Scheer.
Yeah, fair enough. Very true.
Yeah.
I guess to kind of finish off a look at the platform, there's so much more. I think it does get a little less exciting or less surprising, could I say, as we delve into the latter 50 pages. Yeah, it's pretty much all the standard Conservative promises. I mean, there is a significant recognition of like Indigenous populations. They have a really interesting and developed section on their foreign policy outlooks with a bunch of little proclamations about how they'll conduct. And I think, as we were talking about earlier, they also have a pretty defined section on veterans and veteran rights, which I would expect nothing less from O'Toole. So there's
some interesting.
So, yeah.
I am a fan of his CANSUC proposal. Well, I guess not his proposal, but his endorsement of it.
Yeah, for those who don't know, CANSUC is an international. Or do you want to explain it, Yussef, because you're such a big fan?
You can do it. You have an elegance.
It's basically like a Canada, USA, and what was it? And Australia.
It's Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand.
Yeah,
they didn't include the US.
It's basically a new regional bloc of like the big British colonies, if I can call it that way, which are they're to counter China's rise, basically. But I'm a bit more skeptic on it because Canada is probably one of the larger players in that, which is not a great sign. But moving on from that, Yussef loves it. It has a cool name. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
I want to finish on a few questions. We talked about costs throughout this entire thing. Are you worried about the cost at all, really quickly? Do you think that it's a sustainable platform? Because if I was a conservative, I might be a little fearful of when this thing gets costed and whether that might provide some ammunition to the Liberal Party. So,
Yeah, I do like that a lot of things are like 1 to 3 years in term,
mhm.
but I think once the costing comes out, definitely if he gets in power, he can't do everything, it seems like.
It's definitely, I've seen people say, it's definitely a spending platform and not a saving one, which we have not
Yeah.
seen from a conservative leader in eons. So,
I mean, Harper did spend when he came in because it was '08.
yeah, but I think that was more not, he
Yeah,
would not have wanted to do that. That was really
that's
pushing it.
very true.
How well do you think the platform will go over with Canadians? Like, what do you think Canadians who might not be as conservative leaning might think of it?
Yeah, I definitely think that this, if there was like a platform for them to win on, it's this one. I think that the Conservatives are taking like a bit of a leap this way, and it's something I like, and it seems to be working a lot, like, especially from a position where the Liberals were like a lot more probable of having a majority to where there might be a chance that the Conservatives form a government. Um, this platform itself has done a good job so far, and hopefully you know, this kind of well thought out policy might continue in that direction over the next 3 weeks, 2 weeks
Yeah,
to 3 weeks.
it's scarily close. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think especially in the absence of any like the Liberals are starting to proclaim stuff, but it seems very much a reaction to what the Conservatives have been doing because they've been very competent in doing it. So I think in the absence of any strong Liberal assertions and surprise promises by them, this definitely stands out to Canadians. And I've been talking to some of my friends who aren't traditionally Conservative supporters. This is starting to turn some heads. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. I think final question on the platform. Yussef, if you had to give the platform a grade, what would you give it?
I would say something like an eight, eight
An
to
8?
nine.
Hmm. In the Canadian grades, A to 8, A minus, solid A is what I feel like you're leaning towards then, right?
I would say like A minus to A. I
Yeah.
would say, there's maybe a few things here and there that can definitely, from my own perspective, that I would like more or
Mhm.
I would like different, but also from a political perspective, I feel like could be better or changed.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. No, I think I would agree. And I think the polls kind of reflect that. I think some polls show him slightly above the Liberals in terms of popularity and like overall vote count that they'll get. However, I don't think any have them being like probable to win a minority government yet. But it's
Yeah.
looming, right? It's looming.
It's the trend that matters. That's what I think.
Very optimistic. Honestly, if you asked me a month ago, which you totally did, I did not think the Conservatives would be even this close whatsoever. So they've
Yeah.
really surprised me. Before we finish, and I always do a little personal question, and this one is on the candidates again, because we did one the other day about which one would you want to go get a meal from. But this time, because, we're pretty mature people, all of these candidates, let's say they had a child, and you had to babysit one of them for a day, which one would you choose?
That's an interesting question.
Or which,
So I
you can
would
also say which one you wouldn't choose, because I feel like I know what you're going for right away then.
it's an interesting question. I would probably go with Aaron O'Toole's just because I feel like that child would be very easy to watch.
I feel like you could set him in a corner, like looking at a
Yeah.
blank wall, and it would just sit. But that's no fun for you either, right?
I think if there was one I wouldn't want, maybe I won't. I'm gonna try and say his name. I don't want to get it wrong, but Yves Blanchet
Yves Blanchet? Why not his? He seems like a.
or Justin Trudeau's. I wouldn't. One of those two
I think Justin Trudeau's kid. No offense if you're listening to this, any kids of politicians.
would be rowdy.
He'd be the type to paint on your walls,
Yeah, and
Uh,
then Blanchet's kid would just like angrily yell at you in French throughout the
for some reason,
experience.
and I don't want
Yeah.
this to reflect whatsoever on me, the podcast, anything. I could see his kid being a bit of like a pyromaniac or something and just burning papers. I don't know why. It just had that opinion. But uh, I think a Jagmeet Singh's kid would be fun to like kick a soccer ball around with. I feel like he
Yeah,
could.
he would be a cool guy. I think.
I think this pretty much summarizes up what we think of the leaders, although I have a much higher opinion of Yves Blanchette than you might. So. Actually, the worst kid would undoubtedly be Maxime Bernier's kid.
Oh, I didn't even consider him.
I feel like he'd not be like a bad kid, like per se, but he might be like, those prep school bad kids who
Yeah.
like turn out to be the villains of every high school like movie.
Honestly, I think I'd be scared of him.
Fair enough. Well, thanks for coming on, Yussef. I really enjoyed some enlightenment and some conservative values being put onto this podcast, really showing.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. It was a pleasure. We need to catch up more. I think the last time we talked was actually, I think, in Berlin of all places.
Yeah.
We're both blessed enough to have EU passports, and we're both vaccinated, so we were able to do some traveling. So we ended up in similar places over the summer. But yeah, no, if you're listening and you want to end up in similar places as me, continue watching, keep listening. Drop a comment, drop a like, drop a subscription, share it with your friends and family. Any support is good support in my books. And let me know how you think I'm doing. If you want to be on, let me know as well. And I guess keep looking forward to future episodes. We have some plan. I think this weekend I'm getting Kevin and Ryan together again, and we're doing a This Week in Review Part 2 episode. And I think on Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll be doing a review of the Green Party's situation, as we could say it. But let's close for today. So goodbye, everybody. Thanks for listening.